Hi, everybody. I'm Michelle Gibson, and I'm here today with Charles Ross. And Charles really has been coming forward with a lot of great research and has been speaking with a lot of different people on the work that he's been doing. And I'm really glad that he and I were connected and able to get together to talk about his work. And Charles lives in Taiwan. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Charles, so you can tell us a little bit about yourself. And I think you have something together today that you want to talk to us about.
Yes. Hello, Michelle Gibson. I feel very privileged to have this opportunity to speak to you, and I appreciate you finding the time to speak to me. For me, this is a very important moment because I have been the person that has been inspired by your work for quite a long time, years, in fact. And I think you've kind of pushed the human race in its consciousness in a very profound way, giving people the confidence to challenge history, to challenge narratives, to challenge the kind of status quo, and to find truth. And I think truth meets you halfway. It is a living thing. We do not live in a realm that is limited to three dimensions. We live in a realm that has something that is almost visible, but needs you to meet it halfway. And I think that that's something that you've really ignited within me and within, I think, hundreds of people. And I think these people have to get together because they're the real people. They're the people that have woken up and that can help everyone else wake up. But we have a lot of evil forces in this realm that are attacking us, that are trying to keep us in a lower frequency. And yeah, I mean, if I was to choose a person that did that for me, that is you. And the fact that you are also somebody that you can speak to online is just incredible. I mean, that's a magic in itself. I think we have to view this technology as a type of magic, and I think that then makes it easier for us to understand why we have the confidence and the ability to articulate things that we had no business doing before. And I like to think of 2020 as a turning point for me because I suddenly realized that certain demonic entities are now overtaking that argument that has been going on since the beginning of time, which is, what is freedom and how much freedom are we allowed to have? And when that line is overstepped, that balance hasn't been met, then the argument no longer works. And the argument is what is freedom? And I think it starts with the Garden of Eden. I think it starts with our connection to Christianity, to the Bible. Almost every religion has that single God entity. And I do believe this is a spiritual journey for everyone. I think you will be protected. I think as you ascend to a higher consciousness where you start to accept crazy things that you would have never accepted before. But it's all about taking the information that is around you. And your most impressive research, for me, to be more specific, is the very ancient architecture that you found and the ridiculous narratives associated with it, specifically in North America, and basically Moorish mosques, domes, giving us real reference to an empire that existed not so long ago, but was removed from the narrative and removed from our consciousness. And I believe I know what that empire was. I have three names: Tamaray, Amaruka, and Kushata. I also think that the language of the Moors or the Moorish Empire at that time, which originated in America, not in Morocco, where it is today. I also believe, after looking at hundreds of old maps over many years, that I can say with some confidence that America was Africa, that Africa was Babylon, and that Europe was, in fact, didn't really exist as a civilization until the 7th century. And that was because of the Moors or the Moors invading. I also have now created a connection between reverse Hebrew, Aramaic, not the modern Hebrew, which is a misinformation. And I think there's so much misinformation now when it comes to the origin of languages that I've also been able to link Latin to Hebrew, which means Latin is not a Roman language. And maybe the Roman Empire never existed. It was the Moorish Empire. So Roma was Mora. And the Moors ruled the entire world because there are even references in the Republic of China, in Hong Kong. Lots of East Asian countries also have lots uh, Latin phonetics within the Chinese names of cities. And that brings me to like blonde-haired Asians that I've seen here. And then obviously, I mean, if I was to maybe do more research, I would go to Iran next and Peru and find the true origin of the Aryan or the pale-skinned person. Because Europe and the European kings, this was my first awakening really after obviously looking at your work, Campbell Purvis, John Levi, all of these like great minds that are like spearheading this kind of movement. That the original kings of even my own native Germany, where my mother comes from, where I was born, going to actual churches and looking for something that I never saw before, looking for these black, swarthy Moroccan kings, and suddenly realizing every single church had them in the name, in the old, like they're called like alcoves at the back. They had like the statues at the back, the hair. I started to realize that the hair follicles, the facial features, the noses removed. I mean, I thought that was just Egypt. Then I realized they did that in Germany too. So this incredible exodus then fits perfectly into Al-Andalus and the Tariq ibn Ziyad, the invasion of 711 AD, and that they went through the whole of Europe, and that this whole Portugal, Spain narrative, and that they couldn't get through France or something was wrong. Poitiers obviously has those Moorish kings. Then it was like dominoes. It was like every day something new. Then I found out there were Moresco heads, like Moor heads that were placed outside the houses in Italy. My sister has an Italian a partner. So then the Moresco heads suddenly it clicked, these are Moor heads, Then the Morris dancers, it clicked. They are just wearing costumes of the Moors at that time. Then I went to Moritzburg, and I know it sounds so obvious, Moritzburg, right? Moors. But I never thought about it once because I went there as a child and I went there as a teenager and I went there again in 2024. But I still wasn't able to realize that it's Moritzburg. It's literally the palace of the Moor. It's translated into German, so obvious. Then I did research on the Rook and I shared some of that research with Campbell Purvis that the Rook Peruk is the Moorish wig that the German legal apparatus and the British judges wear. That was like goosebumps because the peruk was something I was looking for to prove that chess was missing a piece. Because the rook was the platform that was built on top of the African elephants, first used in the invasion of Rome, or what was originally Rome. And that Rome was obviously in America too. The original Rome was in America. And I have a lot of those names. Those names are still there. Those names haven't been removed. So the rook was an archer kind of platform on top of the African elephants, which were actually American elephants. If you can follow that, that's kind of interesting. So I found at least 10 different types of animals that only exist in America that we know as African, that are part of hieroglyphs. Then I found different kind of lotuses. Around about the time when the White Lotus TV show came out, I was like, wait a minute, I've been looking into lotus blossoms. I've been trying to prove that they're not extinct. They only exist in America, but they were very important part of the religion. It was almost like the acanthus leaf of Egypt or the lotus blossom of ancient China. It was the equivalent in Egyptian culture. And they have been telling us in all history books that this lotus blossom is extinct, but it still exists in America. Hence the inspiration for the TV show Lotus Blossom. So all this kind of White Lotus, sorry. So it's coming at the same time. But I can do research on those because they also exist here in Taiwan. And that's just like that has to have been altered or something. Maybe someone reprogrammed the Matrix, some higher AI. So I have a little bit more confidence now about AI not necessarily being evil or that God can get into anything, right? I mean, he's the creator. So that was like a big awakening. I believe that there was another piece to the chess board game that we are missing. It was more powerful than the queen, and I think that was the rook. And I think that's why the castle moves too. There were like lesser and higher elephants with bigger hindquarters, depending on how they were used in the Moorish military. And yeah, so chess was invented in America, the true Africa, It doesn't come from Russia. It doesn't come from the kind of Tartarian part of the world. And we're not playing it correctly. We're missing one piece, which is the cavalry. The cavalry was not these two pieces on each side of the rook, because the rook was on top of the elephant. And I think there was a Tartar horse kind of super entity that was traveling left, right, every single. Because the queen can go diagonally and vertically, right? Horizontally. But there was another piece missing. And because I've seen it in some portraits, this piece that looks doesn't look like a rook and it doesn't look like the castle. It looks like some kind of queen. So chess really helped me connect this palace in Germany and a few other things. And that seems kind of silly, and most people would just not go that route. But when I link that to the Moorish wig, which in German is peruk, so that's used a lot as a type of adornment, I think. So we have a New Hebrew and an Old Hebrew, and that was very interesting. And then to find out that Latin is actually reversed to create Hebrew. So English is also reversed. And that's why English is like a negative language. And I think it's connected to how the brain works, because in Asia, you would open a book from the back, or we would consider it to be the back of the book, right? So we're opening the book from the back and starting at the end to go to the beginning. And then you also have the swastika and the Buddhist version of the swastika, which is basically Orion's belt, and you have the four solstices, right? Four seasons. So that is very interesting because it basically means that our brain works the way water does. Because water, I've tested this myself. If you use water in Asia, because of the location of the magnetic pole, it's actually going to spin counterclockwise. Whereas in the West or in Europe, it's going to spin clockwise. And this is also a very important part of what the Moors brought to Europe. It's the idea of water irrigation and, just basic hygiene, washing yourself. That's what they were known for. So I think they worshipped to a large extent water, or they worshipped the idea of water, what water was. And this is also true with Chinese culture. Like the Forbidden City had these platforms where they would do water magic and water tricks, and they would kind of like make something go through this labyrinth and then make it go back, and that would be like a show for the people to display their knowledge and their prowess, which I think is the link to technology with Tartaria. Because the problem with Tartarian theory is that we can't link it to the technology. We can't link it to these great buildings with this electric, harnessing power, this ether harnessing technology. So when I studied that in more detail, that then helped me with the Tartaria connection. And I think that it's very hard to then know what to do. Do I carry on finding more about like the technology of the Tartarian Empire or a Tartar city, which I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but Tartar city is actually the name of the original Peking, the uppermost district of Peking was called Tartar City. And this is very important because it's one of the only links that we have left. Because I think the European powers removed all of those empires like Tartaria, the Moors, and a lot of the Moors from Europe ended up becoming pirates. So the Berbers and the Moors became the Barbary Coast pirates. And you've got that kind of skull and bones symbolism of the pirates, these kind of generals that were moved out of their home. This is around between 1450 and 1498. And I think that's when we have the discovery of the New World narrative starting too, which means Columbus, a spy for the Portuguese king, the port of the Mughal, which we call it now, which is another reference to them more. I think that that's when we have the Collins, this very powerful family now, of course, which owns like Colombia and a lot of large land masses. So I'm kind of bringing it now up to the 15th century. But this is important because that's when you get the discovery of the New World narrative, which is actually not the discovery of the New World. It's the beginning of the most fascinating part of my research so far, which is what I believe is the actual beginning of World War One. Now, World War One started in the late 15th century and started with the invasion of America, or what we today call America. And I have actually some information about that. So this period of time was really when European Moors returned to their homeland because things weren't going very well back in Europe. They had to defeat the Visigoths, I think, in order to conquer, but they came from America. The story about them coming from Africa is possible, of course, because they were also very powerful empires, Moorish empires in Africa. But the problem is we don't know everything about all of those names and their war banners. So I believe that when this attack happened on Europe, it was about 700 years after that they were finally removed. But of course, they were not Vikings. They didn't bring their wives with them. So they ended up finding women within Europe. And that's why you get this interesting difference in people's complexions depending on which part of Europe you're in. So if you're in Sicily, you're going to get a very dark complexion because the Moors came there very early on, which suggests that they were the ones with the Armada or Almada. And if you ever hear al in front of a word, if you get that phonetical structure like the al, like Alabama, Alcatraz, Alhambra. If you get that in front, we are talking about the Moorish Empire every time. No one picks that word. No one picks those names for any other reason. Every European empire that we know today as a country that's 200 years old was once a Moorish principality. Every single one. I have their war banners, I have their sigils, I even have some pictures of like ornamentals outside churches and stuff.
I think it's really important, and I really appreciate that you've taken on the Moors in your research because it's hugely important. And I had an understanding of it when I started doing my research, which was sacred geometry, ley lines, and the Moors. That's where I started,
Yeah,
and that was almost 8 years ago, and it's taken me all over the place.
yeah,
But I knew what I was looking at, and even though I've looked at places I had no knowledge of before, I always found what I was looking for because I could find the same signature everywhere. And in order
yeah.
to get to the truth of this world, you have to let go of everything you've ever believed to be true. And
Mm.
that time period that you're talking about, like in the 1500s and 1600s, in my research, what I've come across is that was when you started having the modern languages come into play. Modern English, modern German, modern Spanish, modern Italian. It's like they were
Yeah.
created all at the same time, but it came in
Yeah.
like, and English came in through Shakespeare, it came in through the King James Bible. And when you research that specific area, that's what you find. That's where the words were coming in.
Yeah.
So it's like they
Mm.
gave us our languages when they gave us the false history that we're taught from cradle to grave to explain everything. But when
Yeah.
you start
Mhm.
looking at places specifically, it falls apart. The narrative literally falls apart. And, there's so many different things that need to come back out just by questioning it and even researching where you live, but
Yeah.
everywhere. Those were a lot more that I can say. I know I was stationed in Germany from 1983 to 1985, and
Mm.
there was I was in Augsburg, and at the time I was like 19, 20, somewhere in there, a long way from waking up, but Moors were everywhere. You were saying in churches, in place names. The Three Moors was a
Yes.
popular tavern for service members in Augsburg, but we
Yeah,
don't
no,
think a
it's
thing
everywhere.
about it.
It's yeah.
And the patron saint of Germany is a Moor, and the Black Madonnas are everywhere.
It was not hard to find, but you can't see it unless you're standing on some kind of foundation of knowledge where that's concerned. You just can't see it. Like my uncle sort of knew there would be something I might like to see. He didn't know why. He said, "You don't really have to look at this. It's not." And he kind of pointed me roughly in the right direction. And then I was like, wow, this is exactly what I've been looking for. Like these numbers chiseled out and J's instead of ones at the beginning, knowing that it's not a long time ago now. If you take 1,000 years away, then the Renaissance becomes a Moorish Renaissance. And suddenly you have to attribute everything, the oil paintings, the sculptures, the great architecture, the Vatican, everything you have to attribute now to them because there's no time now. There's no time for some Queen of Spain or Visigoth lord to force the Moors back. There's no time to build anything. So all of it must have been theirs. And that's a powerful moment. I do have footage of that. I have posted that a few times on my Instagram. But then when you look at their faces and it's like, how didn't I see this before? And I think a lot of people know, even in like Germany, even very conservative people, they sort of know. They're used to having the fountain that is called the Moor's Fountain, the Moor in Brunnen. You can find these in Austria, Switzerland, Belgium. You can find these all over the place. And even in in like Italy, almost all the surnames are Moorish surnames. And then you look at like Tangier and the Tangier, which is being used all over Spain as a very like that's their identity, is their food, you know? And all of them have the names of Moroccan cities. And even though I do believe that those cities, the original cities, weren't actually in Africa, like I can't find a map before the 1400s that has the pyramids or Cairo in Africa. But you have all these pyramids in America, you know, like I think there's like over 100 of them now. So it's like when you begin to prove one thing, there's something else waiting that hasn't been completed. And now obviously the whole world is waking up to it because of probably because of just a few people's research, just maybe three or four people do the research, and then everyone's like, yes, yes, my mother, we thought she was crazy. She thought, but she always used to say she's like Native American. She's not from Africa, you know? And, uh, and that's the biggest thing that's I think happened in the last couple of years now, you know. But it was connected to that. It was connected to Tartaria. Make no mistake that it was connected to finding out what land meant, what black soil was. And then you find out there were actually a lot of black Roman emperors, and the entirety of the Norman invasion of Britain was the Moors invading Britain. Because when you start looking at all this education that they give you, all of these beautiful things, and then as soon as it's Norman, there's only one or two lineages left. And then you have the Plantagenets and the Stuarts and the German Moors, the German Moorish families, Saxe-Gotha, Coburg, Habsburg, they all escaped because the revolutions. And then you realize the revolutions were part of this whole getting the Moors out of Europe. And it's like, of course, I know exactly what happened, you know.
Yeah.
And that's not in history books. That's not on Google. AI can't help you there. That's 100% your own intuition.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think you're talking about the revolutions of 1830 and 1848.
Yeah, but they
Um,
but they were going on for a long time. Like it started with the French, then it was the Russians, then it was the Bolsheviks, and then you find out all of these families, Kaiser Wilhelm, Tsar Nicholas, they were all brothers and cousins. They were all part of that same Moorish lineage that escaped from mainland Europe to a more easily defensible geography, which was Britain. And then you realize that the original British king came from the actual Troy, the old Troy, the original Troy, and then you see the interchangeable Hebrew, Latin, T and Y, and then you realize that New York is old Troy, and the Trojan king Brutus came to Britain, and now you know that the oldest land is the one they told you was the new one. That was Guy Anderson actually put me onto that, and I looked into it more, and then Scotland got its name from an Egyptian princess that escaped, and they went to Spain first. Why are you going to Spain first? It doesn't even make any sense. And then you realize, oh, of course, yeah, they messed with our maps, didn't they? You know, they had to, you know.
yeah.
So have the Scotia, and she brings her king, her deity Kunum, right? And then that becomes Canunos. And so you have the religion and you have the name and you have the family, and then you realize why they're all red-haired Irish and why they're hated so much by the British, and you know, because they knew who they were back then. I mean, I wasn't alive, obviously, you know, during the fall of the monarchy, but you know, this monarchy now is putting everyone into debt because the Rothschilds want to be part of the monarchy, part of the royal lineage, so they're forcing them to mate with each other, kind of thing, to become part of that royal lineage that lives forever. You know, this great kind of illusion, really. There is a big connection there between the hate for the Irish because they knew that they were from the original Egypt and they were obviously fighting. They were obviously hated each other because they were removed from their land. Now that's America. That's the Nile was the Mississippi. It's the only place on earth where you have a four-headed river system. That's biblical. And then you have obviously other references like gopher wood, which only exists there, which was what the Ark was built from. And I've gone into that before with Guy Anderson. But now we know what to look for. So we're just searching for these city names. And they're still there. Memphis is still there. Memphis was the that was the main city. That was the big city during Kemet and Egypt. That was the big city. And there were seven cities of gold that were all ransacked, which trace the Grand Canyon perfectly. So, in my opinion. So, I even have the name of those now. I've even got the names of them. So, so the Bible helps. Biblical knowledge helps so much after a while because you realize that if they removed 1,000 years and then added on another 3 centuries at some point later on, Maybe Pope Gregory did that. And I mean, that was a mistake. It was just people after a reset, finding clothes. There was nothing else there. Trying to work out what the steam railway at the end of the railway line was. They spent a century pulling electrical carts through German streets with horses. It took them such a long time to work out that these are electrical things. What is electricity? How can you build, how can you build Köln Cathedral if all you have is hammers? It's so obvious, you know. Behind me is one of my favorite buildings, which has been destroyed. I think it's Tower of Electricity. It's called. It's got lots of names, and it actually had a fountain going through it, fed into it. So this sense of like the Moorish Empire and their water fountains, right? And the electricity at the time, you know, having thousands of incandescent bulbs within the same kind of 2 or 3 years of them being invented within our narrative by Tesla and Edison, and just having no way of having all those bulbs being produced in time for a, what was it, 1898 World's Fair. And the World's Fairs I didn't know anything about until you started talking about them back in 2021 or something. So when the World Fairs come out, I mean, when you find out the scale of those and the architecture, like the sheer beauty of St. Louis at that time, it couldn't be more in your face. You know, you're like, okay, those are the cities that they removed. Those are the cities they destroyed. Otherwise, the whole New World narrative would have never worked, you know? So,
Right. That's where their grip on the control of the
yeah.
narrative really hits
Mm.
home. Because if we didn't have the internet, we would not have the ability to do our own research and we wouldn't know.
No, you
But
can't
with
really blame your father or, you know, grandfather. You can't blame them because it's a shame that they went through their whole life without ever knowing what they were walking around or past or, you know.
and since we don't really know how this went down and how the insane asylums played into anybody that was even remotely able to see what was around them and speak about it. There's so
Yeah.
many things that were working at keeping our consciousness at a low level.
Well, there must have been a generation that knew what happened, and I think they probably didn't want to work. They wanted to do research like we are, and they probably ended up in these buildings. Yeah,
Yeah.
these beautiful palaces that were built for something completely different.
Or they were drunk out of their minds because all the beer and the
Yeah,
wine and the
it
harder
kept them
alcohol
drunk.
that was being manufactured. That gets into the
Mm.
whole repopulation aspect of what the heck was
Yeah,
going on in the 19th century.
the
And
population of some countries is not right. Have you ever looked into the population of some countries that should have 3 times as many people in them?
a
That
little
that
bit,
that.
and, as it comes up, different areas that I'm looking at, but I
Mm.
know there's places that they're like ghost cities.
Yeah, there's some countries in Europe and in Asia where I think they just took people out. They just took them to put them where they wanted them to be. And I think when you start realizing that these Chinatowns that are quite big in some cities, like London is quite a big Chinatown, lots of temples, you suddenly realize that that's just the Tartarian colony. And they already were there. It probably started with those. Like every Moorish castle, there is some kind of strange building that makes no sense, that has some kind of Asian, very obviously Asian sort of Tartarian architecture and pagodas, seven chakra symbolism, all of this. Even Moritzburg had that. Potsdam had that too, and Sanssouci, which is somewhere between Roman and Moorish. Turkish, like Byzantine, and then it also has these Renaissance palaces and these sort of Victorian gardens, and then it suddenly has a Chinese house, and they don't know what to call it, so they just say it, oh, the pagoda, the Chinese house, you know, you know. And then the same thing exists in Japan, almost like copied and pasted, like some kind of weird 3D printed version of the exact same thing. It's called Summer Palace, Winter Palace. Like some kind of king just went on his airship from east to west. And the same palace, the same geometry, the same entrance, the same domes, the same Chinese house, the same everything.
Right.
Obviously, it was more like Chinese architecture is more predominant in China as we obviously as it should be. But was it always like that, or was every style represented? Like almost every city originally was a World's Fair.
I would definitely lean into that. That it was all this, it was the same
Mm.
template.
Different
It,
frequencies, different type of energy for every city. So you have that etheric, then you have the rebuilding, you have the inspirational, the spiritual, the physical, the manifestation, and then you have the communication and a defense mechanism. So like Köln must have been a defense mechanism because they dropped tons of bombs onto that and it didn't break. So obviously there was something magical there. But I don't even know if it was humans who did these. I've never been convinced that this was not some kind of angelic, kind of very high frequency humans that can fly and have wings and all of that, and then low frequency when we end up being like ants and insects, right? So we see all stages of the different life forms on this planet right now. Because if you really listen to your inner consciousness, I think you sort of know that when you're eating a pig, it's a little bit too close to what a human looks like, right? I mean, they transplant hearts from pigs, supposedly. But we have that narrative because they want to remind us that we are connected to the animals that we're eating. Because if we take part in this death ritual, they have a justifiable reason to then rule us. But I think the more things that you can realize are also happening to you in your own reality, the more of these strands that you can disconnect, the less power they have over your thought processes and the more freedom you have then to really use your brain. And I think as you get higher with your frequency, like they say there's seven chakras, but there's over 100,000 chakras. But if you ascend, and it's the same in the Korean and the Chinese as it is actually in the Islamic, they all use the same symbols with the line broken, and then they put it in a circle. And you see the parallels between the Babylonian zodiac and the Chinese zodiac. It's pretty obvious. There's a goat, there's a sheep, right? The fish and the Leviathan. You get that kind of dragon energy, and then you get the rat, and then a Gemini are twins, and then you see that the original Chinese also had, I think, a snake with two heads. So there's some real connections there that why are we not connecting East with a West? Because I've done that, and I've realized that they are staging events within certain years based on the Chinese zodiac. So it's obviously the lunar is more important. For some reason, the lunar calendar is more important, probably because it's more accurate, because there should be 13 months with 28 days. Because Chinese people or Asian people, not just Chinese people, are very much in tune with that calendar. They do a lot of things based on that. So they know exactly kind of when to attempt to have children, which is not an Asian knowledge. I mean, we kind of put it under the bracket of Chinese medicine, which obviously is Tartarian medicine because it's earth people. So I think that this Chinese label, just like the German label, these are not the true names of the people. So the Moors is just something that comes, I think, from Spanish. So I think Moors would be more accurate because the continent was Mu and that disappeared. Maybe that is also Lumeria, right? So then you have the creatures there. You won't know what all the creatures are because griffins are now in movies, so they can't be real, right? But the griffins were part of that. The griffins were 100% part of that. Even in America, there's stories of griffins, and the griffin is such an important symbolism, just like the unicorn, that it must have existed. But there's also animals like the lemur, which came from Mu. So there's also animals that still exist today. But then you have tiny islands like Taiwan with this history of having a famous tiger hunter and then the original flag of Formosa before the Kuomintang arrived from China to escape communism. That flag was also a tiger. Why would you have a giant predator on a tiny island like Taiwan? Obviously, there's something that happened here. And I think that flood wasn't as long ago as we thought it was. Those resets were not long ago. And I'm not saying that the Moors were necessarily a good empire or a righteous empire. Maybe their removal was partly because of how they used people that they had power over. So the slaves or Slavs weren't the black people at all. They were us. And that's something we have to recognize. But even though our history is completely inverted, we can then apply that possible inversion to the language, to phrases, to how our Bibles have been edited. And I think then you suddenly realize that, okay, I'm a lot more powerful than I was taught that I was, or I have a lot more potential here than anyone has ever been allowed to communicate with me. And there are some very old ancient beliefs. And if they are all true, they basically mean that when we are born into our next life, our worst enemies become our parents and our closest friends. And we have to then find the people to reconnect. Because I think remembering the past has to be something subconscious with intuition. Because if we just remembered who we were and we just got a new body, I think we just make the same mistakes again. So I think this is very important because it starts to explain things like why do twins separated at birth end up doing the same job in the same town, marrying the same person, or even sometimes marrying sisters Like there are stories that, like even in Taiwan, where actually it's just like four or five lineages that were part of the royal elites in Manchuria and Tartaria that ended up escaping from the communist revolution, which is not a long time ago. Communist revolution was only in the like 50s and 60s, right? So they still had a one-child policy, I think, in the 80s. So it's pretty recent. This is all pretty recent. And then I think the Kuomintang, the original president of, not president, I don't know what you would call him, emperor of China, the last lineage, which goes through the woman always, by the way, not the man. It gives us real insight into European history because now they had the queen and what then became the president of Taiwan had to escape from the Chinese who were burning all the temples. That's when you get those like crazy videos of like monks setting themselves on fire outside their temples because they had to destroy that Tartarian a religion, the architecture, everything. Just like World War II when they bombed unnecessarily cities like Lubeck and Dresden. I think the same thing happened then, a complete reset, removal of the architecture. The architecture must have been important. If you look at something like that, it must recalibrate your own consciousness. So if we're looking at these old photos and this old publicity material from like St. Louis, Chicago, Coney Island, all of these old, beautiful cities, then I think that does recalibrate you. And I think you get more ancestral knowledge through that because those structures were healing structures, nothing to do with any religion. The Bible is an incredible, important book, historically, academically, spiritually, but the connection there, it was just to claim ownership of something. Religion was the solution to be neutral and claim ownership of the most powerful healing and higher kind of recalibration structures throughout the world.
Everything you're saying is bringing a lot to mind, but with respect to what you were just talking about, it's like the organized religions that we know of, Christianity and Judaism and Islam, are organized religions. They're
Mhm.
just that. They've organized
Right.
spirituality
Yeah.
and they've used that to divide people. And when I say they, I mean
Right.
the controllers, the cabal, whoever's behind this mess that we find ourselves in these
Yeah.
days is planned and orchestrated to get us to this point. And if you connect them with fallen angels, which seems to be the case, and other demonic
Yeah.
entities, they're trying to crush the creator in us, the spark of the creator, the
Yes.
divine that's in each and every one of us, that reached its height, like you're talking about, with this beautiful civilization that was worldwide, that was ancient, with human beings in a much higher level of consciousness than what we've been reduced to, being stuck in our lower chakras. And I picked up when you were talking earlier about the lotus. The lotus is also a depiction of the crown chakra.
Yes. Crown chakra.
When you
Yes.
have an open seventh chakra, it's pictured as a lotus blossom. And
Lotus
that's
blossom. Yeah. Mm.
when you've connected with the creator, when you've
Mm.
achieved the goal, which I believe incarnating in physical form, in the form of us as
Yeah.
human beings, that's what we're here for. We're here to connect with our
Yeah. I
higher
mean,
selves.
the moment we were born, we were standing straight. Yeah. So I mean, we were standing, we were walking. I think by the time most children are 3 years old, they are walking around, they are consciously aware of things. So I mean, that's the gift. The gift is you were already given the perfect apparatus to comprehend this realm. I think that our body is the only inspiration that there ever was for any great palace, church, courtyard, vestibule, every single one. There are some amazing images online. Yes, I mean, when I realized that every single building that I was in was based upon God's image, the human body, from the temple to the courtyard, the legs, the arms, and the inner sanctum, everything. Yeah. And that our skull is actually the perfect sacred geometry that represents the word of God. And this is really where I come into my own. I think this is the one thing where I have contributed to some extent because I've been able to connect the physical body with light frequency, sound frequency, and a color, and then physical matter. So originally, the Bible had actually 88 books and many were removed. Like I think Maccabees is removed from the Protestant, but not the Catholic, or maybe the other way around. So even within Christendom, there are also other splinter paths you can take: Seventh Day Adventists, Jehovah's Witness, born again Christians. So I mean, the Bible must be what God put down here for us to some extent. even though there has been so many edits to it, I think that if you read the Bible, you will know what's wrong and what's right. And I have the confidence, I think, to say that there's certain things that I don't personally believe were originally in the Bible. But I also don't view Jesus as being somebody who was a Christian. I don't think Jesus knew what was going to happen necessarily later on with his own teachings. But the teachings are still there, and there is a wrestling between good and evil. I think everything applies to so many different levels. Like if there are on a very basic level seven chakras, which I think everywhere on earth seems to use that number, then every one of those chakras is also a frequency, a color. It does not only convey the ascension of the human body, but also conveys God's own sort of journey that he wants to take. Because if there's truth in something, it's going to last, it's going to stay, it's going to resonate. So I think if you're always in this ground chakra, then that's, I think, what they were doing intentionally when they wanted to repopulate. There was always some demon whispering into someone's ear for some reason, like, give me offerings and I'll give you the secret. I think it started with simple things like tool making and blacksmithing and things like that. And then I think later on it became, oh, by the way, do you know that you can harness etheric energy and you're actually breathing in electricity, not oxygen? And that the higher you go, the more of that energy you can get, and you can use these Leyden jars to, capture this kind of electricity. And then I think it just kind of went on. And obviously, there is some crescendo in the near future because these demons have been relying upon giving this knowledge to people over a very short period of time. If you look at the advancement of technology from our black mirror to what we have now is pretty incredible, right? But we're still not at the level that people were in the past. We can still not really manifest these great structures. Our architecture is definitely not where it used to be. Our connection with ley lines is not where it used to be. Our alchemy is pretty much non-existent. We lie to each other about everything to make everything more complicated. Because if everyone knew it was just electricity and a magnetism, that's the only thing here. That's the only great, power or force. So people are overcomplicating things, and they're using education systems to overcomplicate things so that you don't find your kind of path. And it's all in the language too. Like I think the Tower of Babel may have been the Moors constructing all of these languages in Europe so that we can't communicate. So instead of having one language, which is probably Hebrew, they then had to create French and German, which are almost so similar to the Latin. Then they destroyed the Latin because that's not complicated enough. And then they created other languages like English, which is a complete reverse. Complete reverse. Everything's negative. Every time you talk to someone, it's a negative contraction, like, isn't it? Aren't you? Haven't you? So even the words are back to front, everything's back to front. So I think this becomes a religion that they have to continue in order to please their masters, which are these fallen angels.
And my feeling is we're probably still living in Babel. I mean, I think the world we live in today with
Yeah.
all the different languages and everything else, where I would say differently is I don't think it was the Moors. I think it was the people that came in, the beings, the entities that came in with the hijack, because I think everything was
Mm.
completely different prior to something
Yeah.
happening, and that the Moors were at a higher level of consciousness, and that whatever came in and took over just completely fragmented everything and took the original symbolism and turned it into something completely different. So like
Yeah.
the all-seeing
So
eye,
666 didn't become like carbon. It became the mark of the beast. Yeah.
the all-seeing eye was the pineal gland and it became Big Brother. And,
Yeah.
I think it was
Yeah.
all done by these parasites, these spiritual parasites that
Mhm.
came in, and they've gone after the original ancient people with a
Yeah.
vengeance. They hold their highest disdain for the people that were closest to God. And then they've been trying to create a new human based on what they want, which isn't good. Of course, not
Yeah.
our best version of ourselves. And we just have to try to do our best to figure out what the heck, because nothing is what we've been told. But I think that's a good point because I think the Tower of Babel, whatever that is now.
It's now.
I
It's
think we're
it's
in it.
definitely Europe. Yeah. Yeah. It happened right there because we have been fooled into putting so much time between us and biblical events that they don't matter. But history can repeat itself in exactly the same way. And I think if you remove the 300 years added by Pope Gregory, and if you remove the 1,000 years that were accidentally added because we didn't know what the J in the Jahre of, which is German, it seems to go back to Germany a lot, which is very interesting. It's almost like Germany may have been some kind of blessed kind of beginning because you do see a lot of Germanic references, even in like in a British royalty, the German lineages, and you see it also in America. There's a lot of German references. I mean, you could have chosen any bird, any animal symbolism, and you decided to choose the Third Reich, the original Scythian eagle, right? So that goes back to Native America again, if you it goes full circle.
Right.
So I think we are in that seventh century. And if everything that we remember or all of our history is nothing more than prophecy, if we then apply all of that, which is nothing more than prophecy, the Bible is just prophecy, prophecy, prophecy. If we apply the prophecy to our time, which is reality, we come at around just before the seventh century when these great Moorish empires invaded, and then we have to find out what they were a metaphor for, right? So it was the Moor of the black skinned man. And I think this is what yesterday I realized. And obviously, they gave me this, or whoever, my ancestors, my sentinels gave me this in order for me to talk to you about it. Because, I mean, this is not like my biggest awakening, but it is definitely a very important one that I haven't really pursued enough. That all of our memory, history, storytelling, all of our academic and religious manuscripts are nothing more than prophecy. There will be a Jesus, there will be a millennial reign, there will be an Armageddon, there will be a change of kings, the king of the north, king of the east. But we just have to know where we are right now. And I think we're around the seventh century now. Can you see what I'm getting at? I know this is getting really theoretical.
I mean, I think we're living in incredible times, and there seem to be things happening right now, like in the
Mhm.
former Persia in
And they're
Iran.
happening exactly the way, Do you know who knows the Bible better than anyone else? It's these evil demonic entities. They seem to know more than the Christians do. Their symbolism, we are almost like one step behind all the time. They already have symbolism of the snake, symbolism of the serpent, the harlot riding the beast. It's everywhere. Like they're putting it in movies everywhere. They're not even bothering with Christmas movies anymore. They're literally just putting it in everything. And they know the Bible better than we do because they were up there in heaven playing their harpsichords with 88 strings, worshiping God. They were made for that purpose. Then they lost that privilege, were thrown down to earth, and there are now these angry, negative, dark entities that forgot about our godlike connection, our bark that we have, our spirituality, our creativity that they don't have, our reproductive abilities, magic that they don't have, and that we can see within their works their fear of God. So why anyone would not be wanting to start with the creator? Start with the creator. Then you realize that you have all the power because if you look at fear long enough, if you look at any of these entities long enough, they shrivel and die. They literally run away from you because they realize that you know what they're thinking. You know what information they're basing all of their attacks on. And you can tell if they're attacking your connection with people, then maybe those people are the ones you should connect with because they know what you want, they know what you desire. But if they show their hand, if you suddenly realize these Luciferians know the Bible better than most Christians, that is important. I think it's only the devil, Satan, Lucifer that can't return. I think all of them can return. I think some of them change their mind. I think the lesser keys of Solomon are how these buildings were constructed. I think they are the artists. They are the ones that built. Not all of them. I mean, most of them never fell down. It may have happened maybe the early 20th century. It could have been very recent. If we forget about everything we've been told, it could be very recent because that's when these great resets happened. I don't want to ever say the same date too many times. You could be doing a lot of things. I think we are all doing a lot of things that are like almost tithes to the evil one, like
Mhm.
without knowing it. If we really knew what was really going on, if we could see more than just infrared, ultraviolet, all the battles, the fights, the constant attacks from different kind of demonic entities. I think it would be very hard to get up in the morning and, leave your house. But I know I'm protected. Me and my family had a very serious car accident when I was about 14, and our car was completely totaled. Yeah. And it was like turned over onto its roof. And no one, even my baby sister, no one had a scratch on them. And I don't remember how I left that car, how I got out of it. Getting out of the accident was obviously this like incredible thing. But I'll never forget looking at the car afterwards in the lot, like a few days later, and looking at that car, you wouldn't believe anybody walked out of that thing. But I didn't remember those events until recently because there was probably so many times that you were protected by something powerful. And we just forget about that. It's funny how our brain subconsciously removes negative memories and we only remember the good things.
It's interesting because when I was stationed in Germany between 83 and 85, I worked a shift where I worked the days off of the other shifts. So I worked two swings, 2 days, and two mids, which gave me 80 hours off, which was more than the other shifts. Made it worth it. And I would just get on the
Oh,
train and I would go places. I
yeah.
traveled through Europe by myself. Knowing what I know now, would I have
Wow.
done that? Probably not.
Maybe not. Yeah, probably not. Yeah. Sometimes ignorance is bliss
It's
and
bliss.
gives you confidence.
I mean,
Yeah.
I would just get on the train and go somewhere as often as I
Yeah, I mean,
could.
going through Europe it's not that hard to actually go from city to country to country. I mean, I accidentally walked into the Czech Republic once, one of my uncles, because I have a lot of family in Germany. And he said, "Oh, I think we just crossed the border. Yeah, I think we're in the Czech Republic now." And I was like, "What are you, what are you talking about? What? We're just walking in the woods, you know?" It's a fascinating place. But all of these small countries dividing and all of these walls, this sort of dividing countries from each other doesn't seem like a positive thing at all. It was definitely not for my family. Like I was actually born in East Germany, so I didn't see most of my family until I was like 9 years old. And then my mother married and we moved to the UK. So I kind of never really experienced the one Germany. It was always this kind of closed country with three different kinds of cars. I didn't even know what ice cream was. It was a very kind of simple existence. And it's weird, but I do have to be careful that I only remember, the positive things.
Mhm.
Sometimes I do think that there was a lot of safety in that. All the food was natural, for example. Kids didn't eat candy. There was no such thing as kids eating candy. I think I'm glad to some extent that as a child, you're in that environment where everything's very simple and straightforward. Like three types of cars, two types of washing powder, four different types of like a blanket. Everyone found a way to be happy, even though you were in a communist country that you couldn't leave. There was no going on holiday. And if someone came from another country to visit, it would be like an amazing period of time and people would be like asking questions. Children would be gathering. So I think that all of this was intended for specific lineages, all of this communist ideal, the communist ideals, the locking people off, separating people from each other, because something happened and it was not as simple as a world war between two different sides. Something happened, and I think it's connected to those fallen angels.
Yep, I agree. And the region you're talking about in Europe is the Habsburg Empire. And the
Yeah,
male line
very
of the
important. Yeah.
Habsburgs died out in 1741. I've identified some events around 1741. That was the beginning of the Royal Order of Scotland, which was an invitation only level of Freemasonry.
The end of the 1700s was the Constitution and the forming of America, right?
Around that 1776 time period,
Mm,
Adam Weishaupt formed the Bavarian Order of the Illuminati in 1776
yeah.
also. But the Habsburgs, if you really dig down into it, you can see some whitewashing going on there with
Oh,
portraits.
a lot.
They were also in different countries, in Mexico, in America, Bourbons. They were all part of the Habsburgs.
They definitely ended up in the UK. Then you have the Count of Orange brought the Jews back to London. So you have the Jewry Quarter that became the Jewelry Quarter. And I'm very interested in the city of London, how it has its own sort of policing, its own laws, and it's not part of the UK. And then you have those three arms, just like the three families, Habsburg, Saxe-Gotha, and Coburg, which are all Moorish. They're all black Moorish. They all had black Moorish sigils. The Moor heads used to have crowns on. Then they lost their crowns. And then a couple of centuries later, they became animals, birds. I really enjoyed that part of it because I'm a very visual person. I actually studied like art history, graphic design. So I know some of that was definitely there before AI, before the internet, even like Italy, Portugal, all of those families. I've actually got a list of all the families. That took a bit of time. So I think the families, they all have different levels of power, but they all own principalities and countries today. Now, the ones we don't talk about, there are ones we don't talk about that I think are the most powerful. So the Habsburg, yes, House of Orange, Saxe-Coburg, no, Saxe-Gotha and Coburg, those are very powerful families. And I think those are the ones that still rule the world today. So this is another theory. I think I can pretty much prove to most people that the Moors still rule the world from behind the scenes. because they've realized that if they don't want a repeat of the Bolshevik Revolution or the French Revolution, where I think one of those Tartarian kings was executed and his family, and then Russia as well, this a similar thing happened with the Bolsheviks taking over and removing Tsar Nicholas. I think that's when they realized, okay, we can't just have our own lineage ruling. We have to go for the caveat families or the reserve families we sometimes choose people from. And that's still happening today. And to justify doing that, they still show them. They still show the Black Moorish lineage. Usually they will be in the back of the photos, like instructors, or in movies you'll see them sometimes. Very obviously, this person looks exactly like one of those Moors from the statues. And I think they're putting them into photo shoots with the royal families. In the background, there's symbolism that hints at that. I think Meghan Markle, I don't know if you're familiar with the British royal family, but
A little
Meghan
bit.
Markle, even though without much research, you will find out quite easily that she has had some connection with Prince Andrew on a yacht before she even met Prince Harry. And I think she was also married first. She already was quite famous in a TV show called Suits, so it just seems strange. When I looked into her background, her surname stood out to me. It's actually Morkal or Merkel, which is a very obviously Moorish sounding surname. Merkel, Merman, Mormon, yeah. But then I found out that her whole lineage is one of those ancient Moorish House of Guelph, maybe. There's quite a lot of houses that are around. There's quite a lot of royal lineages called caveat, like side lineages that they can choose from to find people. And I think that I don't know if they did research that well, but because it suddenly became very obvious because of this Tartaria awakening that she was an actual royal lineage, that they would never pick someone who was just a random actress. That's the number one rule. That's you have to look at it that way. If there is a president of America being elected, he is going to be part of one of those houses. They do not want to give that power and money to anyone else. This is all already out in the public domain. Like there was a young girl, like 14 years old, who did all of this research a few years ago in the United States, that every single president was related through, I think, the John D line. Every one of them is related to the British royal family, the Saxe-Coburg, which is the German royal family. All of these houses, every single one. So if you realize that those presidents that you're voting for are all kings, they're all royal lineage, and they all bend the knee to Moorish nobles. So the noble royal families, House of Hanover, I think, is the most powerful simply because of the amount of property in Germany, Austria, and the Netherlands that they own. House of Habsburg, I've put that down as number two. And then House of Orange, because of their power over the monetary arm of the Moorish Empire. I say Moorish Empire because there isn't any other name. I can't think, there's no other name. I can call them Tartarians, but I know Tartaria was East Asian and maybe Russian, Crimean, maybe. I know that they were powerful and they built buildings everywhere and they had their little Chinatown colonies. But the Moors were definitely the ones that were in charge of the money. So that's why City of London is in charge of money. Then you have New York charge of the military arm of this Moorish Empire. And I think that's what we'll find out in the end. And I don't want to be presumptuous about are they good, are they evil? I don't think it's ever that simple anymore when you continue along that line of thought, that train of thought. So you have the Committee of the 300. That's something Guy Anderson mentioned. And I think that that means there's 300 families. But I think a lot of them interbreed. They are not allowed to bring anyone else in. So House of Guelph is, I think, the one that owns Britain, and then House of Orange owns the City of London. All of those palaces in Germany, they all have orangeries, and I think that's symbolism for the House of Orange. This is our land. This is our place. Yeah. Don't try to take our land, because I'm sure there must have been infighting. So World War One is the invasion and the removal of their original lineage, which would have been too much of a clue if there was still a Moorish Empire and a Roman Empire in and Algeria was also there in the United States. There would be a real big problem because you could link all of the origins of that lineage back to a specific location. So removing those cities, I think, is the ultimate. It's the ultimate goal, I think, for these families to completely forever remove any chance of anyone waking up and finding out who they are and their history. If you really want to rule the world, you have to make sure that you're not human. You are elite. You are godlike. And that's Satan's greatest wish too, to be forgotten and then treated as God. So that's when you get like the goat becomes symbolism for the devil because the lamb is symbolism for Jesus. So that's number one. It's become gods. Now, gods don't have feet to stand on. They are not of physical matter, you see. That's why they're trying to get everyone into 2D, into AI, into visual things so that we become two-dimensional, they become three-dimensional because they can't get to the fourth dimension without God. So we get pressed down into lower frequencies. But the problem is that God is still there and he's still protecting his people that are there for the truth. And the truth is like the most powerful weapon. Because if people change their mind about who the king is, who the emperor is, who their savior is, then there's no more energy coming to them because the whole concept of attention is energy is so powerful. Because you need creativity, you need a reason for God not to destroy you. And if everyone turns against God, then God will obviously do what he did with Sodom and Gomorrah, with that he was going to do with all of these other cities. And that's when you get these like melted cities that everyone thinks is, there's these new theories about energy weapons. Humans don't have that power. Why would God allow us to have that power? It doesn't make sense. If they overstep the line, we ascend every time. If they take away your freedom through lockdowns, we ascend. It's a direct result. It almost happened within the same few days, right? That's when like people stop going to the bars, they stop drinking alcohol. They shot themselves in the foot, you know? People stop going out and stop drinking alcohol, and a lot of people decided, "Hey, I quite like being more awake. I quite enjoy being more alive and more conscious of my creator." You know, I haven't gone to a pub since COVID. Uh, I have definitely not gotten drunk since COVID. So I think there are also demons that become angels again. I believe there's nothing in the Bible that says a demon cannot change his mind and get his wings back. I think it's only Lucifer, Satan that cannot return.
Like we said before we started this part of it, it's a spiritual war that we're in, and we're the prize.
We are.
If we can be kept down at a low level of consciousness, we can be controlled, and whatever demonic forces need that energy for their own survival because they don't have it, we give it willingly and they take it happily. That's what it's all about.
That's when you get all these fake things happening. Yeah.
But the only place I guess that I would really think differently is I think that whatever came in have taken the identity of the Moors as their own, and that they're
Yeah.
using the
That
Moorish
could, yeah.
legacy to implement their plans, the Mason, everything, the Masonry and the Masonic lodges were originally Moorish Masons.
Can you tell me? I know exactly what you're going to say. I've heard you say it many times. But can you talk to me about Hiram Abiff?
In Masonic lore, he was the builder of Solomon's Temple, and this is played out in Western Freemasonry with third degree initiates, and that he was killed by three unworthy craftsmen and basically was raised from the grave with the lion's paw. So it's almost like they killed the Moors, but they knew that they were going to come back. The whole prophecy thing that you were talking about is in that allegory. We're seeing things right now with what's going on in Iran, which started a couple of days ago, that really kind of went into overdrive about the fall of the Islamic government that was put in place there 47 years ago against the will of the people who aren't even Muslim. And the Shah coming back, the son of Muhammad Reza Pahlavi, who was deposed, I think, in 79. I mean, there's a lot of symbolism in that. Return of the King. And you see the lion symbolism, the
Yeah.
lion and the sun symbol
I
on
know
the
Iran is the king. Iran. Yeah.
yeah, so that's a big
I
deal.
mean, I think it's the king. I think Iran is important. Yeah.
I agree. I think it's
It
very
could be the
important.
most important place.
We're alive to see incredible things, and I
Oh,
that are
absolutely.
prophecy. And I do not believe for a moment that evil is going to get away with what they've done. And I've been saying this the whole way through. Right at this
Mm,
moment, I don't know exactly how this is going to look, but they're not going to get away with all the things that have taken place here that have really caused suffering and death and genocide and culling of God's creation in his image
yeah.
that they hate because human beings have what they don't have, and they need that. They need that energy. They need that for their
Yeah.
survival. And so they've set this system up that harvests that, and leave us in that state of Babel confusion of
Yeah.
we don't know anything real. We don't know
Yeah.
what's
When did we all have different languages? We should all be speaking the same language.
and
It's
we
so
have
obvious.
these
We all have the same apparatus. Why are we speaking different languages?
different,
Yeah.
religious beliefs, different cultures, all of that. And I don't
Yeah.
think it was like that before. Well, of
If you want to
things,
find out what the real religion was, it's the one under attack. All the others were made by the devil. It's the one they're trying to attack, you know?
there are a couple of things that you brought up that got me thinking. You talk about pagodas in different places.
Yeah.
In my research, I've encountered castles in England, Leeds Castle, but it's south of London. And it looks like a European castle on a star fort base. And then I've seen something very
Yes.
similar in Japan, in Nagano, Matsumoro Castle. Looks like a classic Oriental castle, but it's also on a star fort base. And they're both
Yeah.
in like artificial islands in lakes. And then the Taj Mahal
Mm,
in India looks
mm.
incredibly similar to the Hui Mosque in China. And the Hui are an extremely persecuted minority in China. And when you get
Mm.
back to Islam and Muslim being Moorish, but not what we're taught it
Yeah.
is. It's not the same. It was like all the same reconnecting with our higher selves. That's what we're
Yeah.
here for. We're not here to buy and make everybody else rich, the elite, the 1%.
Mm.
That's not what we're here for, even though that's what we've been made to believe. We're here to connect with our higher selves. And the ancient humans knew that, and they were in very harmonious connection with God.
I think everything that they left here, everything that was left over, was just enough for us to go back down that path to be enlightened, to find out what happened. I think that even the worst evil doesn't necessarily start like that, you know. But we do have negative entities. We have evil to deal with here. 'Cause the devil didn't have a devil haunting him. He didn't have some kind of evil entity trying to trip him up, trying to cause him to become evil. He kind of made that choice. And I think there's a desperation now, definitely, in the way things are happening, that you have people who are willing to sacrifice all of that simply out of ignorance, I think. They don't understand what karma is. Karma can be a real hurdle. You know, it can make it very hard for you to get back onto any kind of positivity. So it's like, I don't think they can get to the truth. I think they've made so many mistakes that they almost like that maybe we can convince them because I don't think they have the power to do half of the things that we see on our fake Hollywood news. I
And
think almost all of that you can disregard completely. I think the war, World War One, World War Two narrative, you have to disregard. When you realize quite how much German history I'm uncovering in a small island in the south of a Chinese peninsula, like why is there Nazi history here? Who were the Nazis? Like even my grandfather used to teach in China. I think he lived in China. I think his family was Chinese, but he doesn't look Chinese. I think they were finding families for these people to leave Asia. There's a wonderful story here of a man called George Salmanazar who ended up teaching at Harvard. They said he was a Frenchman, but he spoke Latin and he came from Taiwan. People are saying, oh, he was lying about everything. But he had a lot of notebooks that have never been translated, where he drew a lot of buildings and temples, like almost early Chinese history. So I think this Tartarian thing was deleted from history because it shows that there is no such thing as a Chinese people in Asia, Western people in the West, that was never the way it went. That actually what we today think are white Caucasian people actually were as much in Asia as they were anywhere else. And then that makes me think about all of the 19th century railroad workers were Chinese. I think those were just the people that were left over after that reset. Because before the reset, we have nothing. We have nothing. There's no information, no paperwork. It's that whole like Library of Alexandria, everything was destroyed. We don't know what happened. We can't remember anything. Neither can the Chinese, neither can any empire remember anything before the reset. We have buildings that we can't replicate, and everything in our world that is technological, that is in any way advanced, came from this Sanskrit, these engravings, the hieroglyphs, everything came from there. Even Tesla said he went to Egypt to find out how to build the first battery to have wireless electricity. All of that can be connected. It's not by coincidence that there are pyramids on the back of $1 bills. It's not a coincidence. They know a lot, but they don't know everything because they've given up the ability to get along that kind of path again. And I think that means you have to align yourself with a very negative entity that then removes that part of you. I don't think you can ever sell your soul to anyone. And I don't even know what the soul is, to be honest. But I definitely think you can curse yourself. I do believe you can do that. If you are not aware of it and you are ignorant, it's like water off a duck's back. It's not going to affect you because you don't know what you're doing. It's not conscious. They like to play with you and treat you as inferior through symbolisms in movies, through hidden messages within songs, and through even making you do stupid things like eating meat is eating a dead animal. It's a ritual. It's not necessary. You are not supposed to do that. Your teeth aren't built for that. Your digestive system isn't built for that. You are a herbivore. They've created through science and through lies this sort of in-between creature that can eat meat and can make a choice. And it's very hard for me to not eat meat. It's not easy. They don't make it easy, but they can't make it impossible. They can lie to you, but there always has to be some truth. Otherwise, it's not going to work. This whole balance is not going to work. And I think sometimes they have to remind themselves that God is still listening, that God is still here, that he's still aware. Because there's so much evil symbolism in almost everything that should be academic, easily proven information, right? I mean, so much evil, going on. But yeah, I mean, being protected is one thing, and knowing the rules is another thing. And for some reason, I feel like there's always this kind of marketing ploy that you'll get so much knowledge, so much information if you decide to become part of the construct. So I think in America, everyone who's born is traded on the stock exchange straight away, right? So I don't know if they do that now throughout the whole world, if finally we have almost all become part of a globalized business structure, or if there are still countries that have their own sort of independent governments and their own monarchy. But I think none of that means anything. I really don't. It's you have to consciously make a choice. At some point, you have to say, okay, I'm gonna go this way. And you have the option, like a red pill, blue pill, you have the option to leave the matrix on your own with God by your side, or to do it the quick and easy way, becoming wealthy. Because the devil is not bothered about the people that are doing evil. He's going to leave them alone because they're doing everything that he wants. And I've noticed this in my life. As soon as I started to try to find the truth, to reconnect with God, it's definitely simple things become hard. There are people who can, I think, see your aura, see your power and your connection. And if you knew that half the humans here are not humans, they can tell. I would like to be able to also tell. That's, I think, something I would like to be able to do, to tell whether or not somebody is still human or if they have kind of gone to the dark side, as it were, and if they're really human to begin with. Because I think the human is essentially a culmination of all forms of life. So I think we have a reptilian brain. I do believe that. I think we have a mammalian instinct. And I think we are like the ultimate evolution without believing in the theory of Darwin's theory of evolution, thinking that human beings can ascend and it is also physical. I think that this is when you get like the Buddhist monks that don't age, that live till they're 800 years old. It's not something that's hidden. I believe Asia is not as controlled as the West. In the West, you're never told about anyone that's more than 110 years old or 115 years old. Whereas in Asia, people are obviously living hundreds of years longer than in the West, which is something I don't think you will be made aware of if you've only lived in the West. But obviously, monks hide out disconnected from, our commercial world, from the cities, so that they're able to do that because there is no way to keep any kind of record of these people living in the mountains. Obviously, communism was a really useful tool for the European powers to remove those kind of safety zones, those kind of places, because I'm sure there's less and less now, places where you're completely isolated and removed from the matrix. But yes, I mean, do you need to eat at that time? Because if you look at like a Borobudur, Indonesia, or if you look at those massive structures, those temples, that geometrical massive cities that nobody knows how they were made or 3D printed, even like Angkor Wat in Cambodia, there's no bathrooms, there's no kitchens, nobody's caring about consuming physical matter. At that point, I think you are maybe fasting for years at a time and then eating a little bit, maybe you're kind of benefiting from sunlight more. And I think the more blessed parts of the world have more sun. As you become the son of the more, you get more sun. And I think then you have other countries that maybe where there's been too much low frequency activity, so humans are not able to manifest anything other than rain. And I think that must be the way we can talk at some point. Like there's a very select number of people that you can even talk to in that way about that. And it's important. It behooves us not to talk to everyone in this way about things because your energy can be drained. No matter what you are, your energy can be taken from you. It
Right.
can be drained. And I think the Chinese zodiac tells us what color to wear, what time of year as well. It's pretty interesting. I believe I also found through my research, looking into the Moors, the original first 10 presidents of America when it was still called Morocco or Tamari, which goes back to the first map that I was sent by someone. There are Moorish societies, Moorish science temples, all of this, and some of them have, I think, a lot of information because the Dominican Church, not the country, a Dominican Republic, but the church, the Dominican Church, didn't burn the books that the Pope told them to burn, all of the Moorish books. At the fall of Mauritania, Andalus, Cordoba, all of those European, well, they're called European now, but they're obviously part of Africa. So those two big empires, America, Africa, and then Babylon, which is probably the original Africa, which we call Africa today, those empires were removed and all their books were burnt, all their libraries were burnt, thousands of Moorish books. Knowledge that would make us ascend today into a completely different realm. Obviously, the Moors were the ones that created airships, which were very popular in Germany. Even my grandmother still has photos that she took of the airships. So this is also recent history. It goes right up until 1914, I think. So everyone had airships. Airships, if you were wealthy, you had an airship and you could go anywhere you wanted in the realm. And they called those refueling stations mooring stations. So the word more is also in the English language because when we say more, we are insinuating excessiveness, right? To add something to something, to give more, to have more, right? And there's a lot of places like Moore Street next to Elephant and Castle, train stations. Even the names of things are still more. So it is very recent. Have you heard of the original 10 presidents?
I have. I have
Oh,
not
okay.
studied it, but I have heard of that.
I'm pretty sure that they took the entire first 10 presidents, which might have been 11 presidents, they took that history. They had to whitewash Abraham Lincoln because he was a Blackmore too. But they moved that entire history and planted it into Libya. And they took the flag and they just put one star on the flag, make sure that if there's a reset and everyone forgets the history, you can still go back. You have those clues that you can follow. So you can find the one star instead of the 50 state flag. And the names of these people is not Libyan or African in any way, shape, or form. Most of them were born in the United States too. Some of them are even hidden within symbolism on the original currency. Some of them have very obvious connections with the presidency in America. So I think they didn't want to completely delete the history. They just wanted to put it into another country.
And they whitewashed a lot of it.
A lot of it was whitewashed too,
It's
yeah.
all over. It's pretty tricky because we've all been educated in a certain way, in a certain belief system. And probably one of the
Mm.
hardest things to do is to try to expand our thinking and
Yeah,
realize the depth of the deception that's taken place here and how much of that has been used to
yeah,
turn us against each other, which is
yeah.
not our nature. If we weren't being manipulated, we
Mm.
would get along. If people of a certain skin color or a religious belief weren't killing somebody with a
Mm.
different belief or a different skin color and being conditioned
Yeah,
to distrust and suspicion and fear based on those things, getting that conditioning all
yeah,
the time, we would not be like that. And it seems like every time in our modern history that we were on the verge of breaking free, something would come in and crush that. I don't think that's going to happen
yeah.
as we're in this
No, yeah,
momentous time in our history as the Phoenix, as the hero's journey. God will prevail. We will prevail. We may not know how this is going to
yeah.
look, but the fact that we're
Mm.
waking up at all is rather miraculous considering how much conditioning has been going on and brainwashing that's been going on.
Yeah,
Everywhere we
yeah.
turn, in every institution that we've been taught to trust, there's corruption. It's not easy to be on this path and bring things into awareness that just weren't there based on specific lines of research. Putting words
Mm.
to things that don't have words because it's not what we've been told is very
Mm.
challenging. And it's like I'll always tell people, do your own research, question the narrative, be
Yeah.
discerning with everything, whoever it comes from. But to even begin to come to a different level of understanding, you have to be willing to let go of what we've been taught. It's just really
Mm.
important. And you can find real information, like you were talking about, in the architecture, in the infrastructure.
Yeah.
That's where it is to be found. And if you compare that with what we're told about it, they don't match. They don't match at all.
No, doesn't.
And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's where it
Doesn't
really
match.
falls apart. And more than anything, it's discernment, critical thinking, because we're awash in information. And information is power. So you can use it for good or you can use it for ill. But for the
Mm.
seeker, the truth seeker, the person that's looking for that information, you really do have to be discerning wherever it's coming from. But the
Mm.
easiest place to start is one's own community. I started to notice things where I was living in Oklahoma between 2012 and 2016. You talked about 2020 as being a big eye opener for you. I started paying attention to the end of the Mayan
Yeah.
calendar, and that was when a lot of this stuff started coming
Mm.
in. And I was just paying attention to the date. I was really looking for information that was hard to find. John Major Jenkins and some other people that were looking into the Mayan calendar and other aspects of that. Between 2006 and 2012 was a really big period of awakening for me. And then I started doing my own research in 2018. But by that time, I had gotten all the pieces of the puzzle that I needed to get started. That was when I was like, okay, I've got to get this back out. And I started blogging and making videos.
No, I love that the Fibonacci sequence and the flower of life that you had, where you obviously started with that image in your podcast, and I think that is a really good beginning, like first lesson, if you like. Every country has that. They all use it. You see it on the European and American paper money. You see it within Leonardo da Vinci's sketchbooks. You see it all over the Taoist temples, Buddhist temples. They all have the same kind of pattern. And then you can then move on to other patterns. It's a really a good way into opening your mind. It's a really good first step. I always thought that was really kind of powerful because I think that means something to everyone because that's like genetic memory, you know. That's like an important thing. It's also the division of the human cell after the fertilizing of the egg. Even the Egyptian sarcophagi that I saw in the Neue Gallery in Berlin had the same patterns. And then you can move on to other patterns like the meandering path, which you see everywhere, which is, we're told it's Greek, but it's obviously not that simple. It's in the Buddhist temples all over the walls and everything, yeah. So you see those connections and then the posture of like Gilgamesh and the posture of Chinese kings. Like Fujian was the original god before they splintered off into having like hundreds of different gods. The beginning, there was always one god. There's always one creator god, even in China. And a lot of the Indian gods were also taken from Egypt. Quite fascinating. And then I found also Buddha next to Hercules as a stone engraving panel. When I found Hercules next to Buddha, and I realized that Buddha traveled somehow to Greece. But yeah, then you realize that absolutely everything is incorrect. You have to start again for yourself. You have to be autodidactic, teaching yourself, everything. Because if you just remove cities from one country, that is not enough anymore. You have to do more than just remove a city. You can remove city architecture and then tell everyone it's new. It's not going to work anymore. And I hopefully that will stop wars happening, like people just bombing temples and trying to remove something from somewhere. Because we know the truth now. We know that this whole world had different architecture for different levels of frequency, energy, electricity, static, etheric energy. One day we'll find out that airplanes don't fly on jet fuel. One day we'll find out that of Vamana's ancient Indian technology, that those temples were actually like, some of the most advanced things like Hampi chariot. That actually we've been fooled a lot. And I think maybe that is the motivation that we needed. Sometimes I think, would I be as interested in this if it was all given to me when I was at school? No. So that is very scary thought because then you suddenly realize why maybe God allowed Satan to do his thing. But obviously, the lie is that you are in danger. The lie is that you should fear anyone other than God. And that's the lie. The lie is so simple. But if I told you that before your awakening after looking at the Aztec calendar, you wouldn't have remembered I said that an hour later, right? It wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have stuck in your frontal lobe instead of your subconscious, which is deleting everything so that you can continue. Because I don't think we could continue if we remembered all of our previous manifestations.
And I've heard that when it comes to awakening, if we came into this world knowing everything, there's no
Yeah.
challenge in that.
You're not really learning anything. It's just, I think it's remembering. I think the information was already in there waiting to be deciphered and opened. And if you got it all straight away, you wouldn't achieve anything. You would, here's all the information you need. What's the point of playing? What are you going to learn from that? Learning is not someone telling you what to do. That's the biggest conundrum. It's like you can literally tell someone the secrets of the universe and they'll just spend half the time laughing at you. You know, I've done it. I've tried to tell people. I've said like, if you keep doing this, you're not looking at it in the right way.
So I think it's human nature to want to have it all explained in one nice, easy package.
Yeah,
People want that, but it's not like that. There's no one size fits
it's not.
all. Even with the kind of work
Hmm.
that we're doing, I feel like each person is bringing in what they're guided to bring in. That's part of the missing
Mm.
information, the missing truth of this world. And it has to come in from the ground up because it's been removed from the top down. And pattern recognition is a really important part of this. It has been for me since it's been removed from books and education. It's pattern recognition.
It is. I do believe that the people who allow things to happen are almost as responsible as the people who are perpetrating these crimes, especially in the United States, where obviously these were ancient cities. They had underground water irrigation, they had electricity, wireless electricity, to an extent that was never heard of in the 1800s, early 20th century. It was not even financially feasible to have any of those things. And they certainly weren't making money and they didn't have railroads going to these places. These were ancient cities. These were ancient cities that were the result of a civilization that had evolved over many centuries. But could those cities have been destroyed and removed if the people there were able to comprehend them? I don't think so. I think the people were not ready. They couldn't understand. They couldn't even comprehend what they were looking at in any other way than it must be temporary. It must have been put here just for us to eat some candy floss and show us some people from other parts of the world. Could anyone in America have comprehended the palace of electricity? Maybe they couldn't have. And I think that's why it was possible for it to be removed. And I think it's like that with any city on Earth. If the people are not high enough frequency to comprehend it, then someone will find a way to destroy it, to remove it. This is the power of this research we're doing right now and the people that are going to watch this. If we understand this stuff, can they remove anything? Anything else? I don't think they can because you'll go to that place in your town, in your city, and you'll say, this is part of our connection to God. This is part of our connection to this is our Jacob's ladder. This is our way to be remembered. And maybe we want to remember these angels that anger the devil so much because they decided to build something beautiful on earth after falling down and ascending again. I believe that happened. I believe the lesser keys of Solomon are just angels that were forgiven. Solomon can't control a demon. That's insane. What are you talking about? Like he puts a rotten fish on a sigil on the floor, and somehow the demon says, "Put the fish away, and I'll make you a castle." It's just not fairy tale time. This is awakening now. We are awakening. Okay, they had a chance. They said, "Okay, I'll play along." And oh my God, what happened? We built this beautiful city for these people, reminded them of God, and now we can get back up there, pick up our harpsichord, and praise God again. Like that's what we were made to do. Of course, we don't want to be down here with three dimensions. Why would you want to be? And then one day we'll look in the mirror and we'll realize that humans are connected within that cycle too, that we have a place here too, and that we can do like telepathy. We can actually manifest. We have powerful positive, negative energy. And our invisible body parts are starting to manifest too. We're starting to realize what we're capable of, and they don't want that. Like, if at some point in the next few years you are not under some kind of pressure to conform in some way, then how are you ever going to practice really moving things like physical? I'm talking about physically reading people's minds with your intuition.
And it seems like prior to whatever happened, people knew about those higher abilities and they've been
Yeah,
kept more intact in the East than in the West. But the West had it too.
definitely more tax. Yeah.
The West had
Oh,
it
yes.
too.
Yes. I think the West
And
had it first.
so you've got the whole idea of monks and nuns, and we've been
Mm.
raised in the West with the whole idea of self-flagellation and hair shirt. But I think that monks and nuns of the East are still doing what the ones in the West were doing at one time. So they go into the mountains like you're talking about in caves and surviving because they've tapped in with their God selves. and their super abilities, the abilities we all have if we knew how to
Yeah.
access them to warm ourselves
Yeah.
so that we could stay warm in a cave.
Yeah.
People have the ability to bilocate and to run at super fast speed and probably even fly if we knew how we could do it. I mean, I don't think the
Mm.
American TV series The Flying Nun was satire because you see the flying monks of Tibet, you see that in artwork, and they were able to use
Yeah.
the mind to push their hand through solid matter like rock. And you see that in monasteries, you see handprints and feet prints. And that's the thing with like the lamas of Tibetan Buddhism and the Rinpoches. Those that were at such a high level of self-realization were able to direct their next incarnation consciously and keep that
Mm.
lineage alive that way. In our modern history, the Chinese go into Tibet in 1950, start destroying the monasteries.
I don't know who exactly created communism, but it was definitely a tool to get into these Tartarian lands and remove their religion, their connection with their ancestors, their connection with the creator. I don't even know how that's possible, but they must have done it with maybe money and gold. But there was always some kind of issue between the Chinese that were very far down south in maps of the 1400s. They were just like fishing establishments, fishing villages, and small precincts in the south of China. And then there was that wall, the Great Wall of Tartaria, which we now call Great Wall of China, which was basically keeping them there. So I think a European power with a large Al Amarda came with their ships, with their guns, with this, gunpowder that they obviously got whispered to suddenly have. And I think maybe the Ottomans were also part of the Moorish Empire. And I think they then gave the Chinese weapons and everything that they needed to remove Tartarian lands. I just don't believe that it was Chinese culture and Chinese religion. Otherwise, how could communism work over there, where literally every family connects their ancestry to these temples? It's not a religion, it's deity worship. They're connecting their ancestors to these temples. So it couldn't have been the people of the land. And I always use the analogy of Solomon choosing the correct mother for when two mothers claimed the same baby. One was willing for the baby to die to make sure neither of the mothers had it, and the other one said, let the other one have the baby just to make sure that her child was still alive. And I believe that the Chinese had nothing to do with these temples. These are not Chinese temples. These temples go back to that Tartarian lineage, that Aryan, Caucasian, Asian lineage, where those original people loved those temples. Those temples were part of their ancestry, their connection with the past. They burn money here in Taiwan every few months because they believe through fire you can then connect to your ancestors. All the monks, there's video footage in the 60s of all the monks setting themselves on fire and burning for hours and still sitting in the flames. Their bodies didn't disintegrate. They don't show that part. They just show it all pixelated out because they don't want you to know that fire was not an enemy to these high frequency people. It was a doorway. So fire is always this kind of doorway. I think Janus also has been used, this two-faced god that you can look back and forward, you can go through the door. And I think fire is their portal. But obviously, if you touch fire, you're going to burn. Your molecular structure is going to be completely destroyed. You're going to die, right? But there are stories about these monks not burning. And there are stories of witches not burning. Like the Salem trials, they didn't burn. It was a test to see if they were witches or not. So I believe fire is not even what we're told it is. I mean, fire is going to burn you, so don't touch fire. I'm not telling anyone to touch fire, but I'm saying at those high frequency, those elements no longer affect you, is the Taoist teaching. So is that like, was that the doorway? And I think what I'm trying to say is you couldn't destroy Chinese temples and remove that religion in a million years if you were part of that empire, if you were actually connected with that empire, because you are destroying your ancestors. Why would you do that? A communist agenda. It just makes no sense. But I know Chinese people want to go to Taiwan on holiday to see those temples because they don't exist anymore in China. I know they want that, and there's only a select number that can go there. But when you go into those temples, you suddenly see Byzantine temples. They were never white, they were always painted red, the pillars. They always had beautiful murals on the walls. The Byzantine temples, the Chinese temples, the similarities are crazy. They have the Fibonacci sequence, they have everything, all of the apocanthus. They even have in a town here called Dashi, they have the fasces, the bundle of twigs, the Roman bundle of twigs. They have that everywhere. I've done video footage of that, and I usually get like a few thousand views within the first hour. But as soon as I post anything about these places in Taiwan, I'm lucky if I get 50 views. Yeah. So they definitely don't want people to know. The facets, the Roman facets has nothing to do with Rome. The Roman eagle was on top of every house in Kaohsiung had an eagle on top. Yeah, this is really important stuff. But if I go into Taiwan now, it'll be another 3 hours. But I would love to show you some of the train stations, some of the references to like a Germanic architecture, some of the granaries, some of what they call Japanese military structures, some of the star forts that are like next to the ocean here. There's star forts in Taiwan too. Dutch narrative, we can blow that out of the water straight away. There's this whole Dutch building star forts everywhere. Not true.
I know what you're
Star forts,
talking
nothing
about.
to do with military. Yeah, this is all about water recalibration and yeah.
I would be really interested. I'm going deep into the whole railroad, canal, waterfall
Yeah.
connection that I'm finding everywhere. And now that I'm finding it everywhere and really know what to look for, especially in North America, I really want to expand that to other countries. And I have uncovered it to a certain extent already from the research I've done going back years, but I didn't have the level of understanding that I do now.
I love that you know all that stuff. I have
Yes.
so much respect for you. But every time I look into the dates and time, they make me angry, because I don't want to be that person that f falls for it. And I think the dates and the times, the idea of time in itself, I don't agree with anymore.
And for me, it's really just a starting point and it's a point of reference for comparison.
Yeah, it's useful, right? Yes.
I mean,
You're more academic than I am, I think.
I'm not an insider. I don't have inside knowledge,
This has been one of
narrative.
the greatest conversations of my life, and I'm very happy that this has happened. This is a big turning point.
But it's interesting because I know the patterns that I see with regards to the whole idea of a worldwide energy grid that I've done the most work uncovering in North America, but I know it's in other countries
Mm,
all over the world. It's the same patterns.
yeah.
And it's taking me longer to get things finished because I go somewhere and I find things that I'm like, wow, there it is again. I would like to expand from where I'm looking at in North America and take it around the world because I
Mm.
know that I'll find it.
Yeah, there's
This
some crazy places here, yeah, as well, with like weird stones just left in the middle of nowhere, hundreds of these weird oval shapes that were definitely part of some kind of man-made or giant-made concept. But they're these massive boulders with weird shapes and I don't believe it's natural. I don't believe anything's natural anymore, actually. I think there's so much happened, so many cities on top of cities, buried on top of cities. It's been like a training ground for so many different entities, here.
and soul evolution. If it was easy, we wouldn't learn anything. And from what little I know of the spiritual world and the soul world, I know more than most probably, but I'm not an expert. What I've kind of gathered along the way is that this whole experience of duality that we're in, the creator experiencing creation and creating the good and the bad for the
Mm.
experience so that at some point we would come together
Yeah.
and overcome
It's hard to get there,
the
right?
bad,
Yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah, it's hard
learn.
to get to that, but
It is. It's not easy being here.
I think we are all the same consciousness and we're little pieces of it and we are being given something to do. And I think this is the best way to experience. Maybe we're incredibly powerful entities that decided to experience this in order to enhance our own comprehension of life. And if there wasn't some kind of issue to overcome, then there would be no reason to evolve, to grow. There would be nothing. And I think if we aren't moving, we're not alive. And I feel like this was a way for us to save ourselves, to give ourselves things to do. Because if you stop moving, you end up with atrophy of every part of your consciousness, right? I mean, you stop using your brain, you stop using one of your legs, let's say, after a few years, you won't be able to move it anymore. So I think we can learn from nature. Yeah, I think nature is like that. I think there are these terrible things that happen, but then there are these beautiful things. And can anything evolve? Will anything be motivated to evolve if it's not trying to survive? So yes, I'm on board with you there. It is something that I don't like to think about for some reason. But I also feel that if you forget something all the time, even though it's important, there could be something trying to take that away from you. And I even think that if there's something we don't want or we don't like even, that could be the result of some kind of manipulation or brainwashing. That there's something we don't like or don't enjoy or don't want to do. It's probably the thing that we weren't able to do before as well, maybe. And that's what we're really here to try to achieve. So it's not just about evil and good, it's also about how easy things become if you have a habit of doing something. And I think my father, he had an issue with alcohol. I have no issue with alcohol. None. I mean, I can drink and not drink. I like drinking, but I know my brain has woken up since I've stopped drinking. Same with smoking. Like my father used to smoke. I don't have any desire to smoke. None. It's almost like the complete opposite. So I think that can this be almost our own lifetime happening in many different forms simultaneously? Has this concept of time stolen the ability to reason in that way? Like, even though our father or our mother or other family members lived at the same time as us, does that mean that is not us? That is not also, we are not the same person? And if we can remove time, the concept of time, the concept of yanas, the concept of things are too late, it's too late, don't, it's too late to start, then I think you harden, you harden because you're not trying to escape anything or you're not trying to achieve anything. So you harden and you stop moving and you shrivel, right? And I think that's the key to a longer life. I think that's the key to waking up. And I think that's when the human reality can change. I also believe that the more knowledge you have, the more knowledge the adversary now needs. So if we ascend, that means they also have to. And I think that's the opposite of what they want to do because creativity allows for us to decide where we go. If we talk about Tartaria, they have to start making movies about it. They have to start writing books about it, which means all the books that were written up until today, every history book, every history university degree is is literally null and void. It is obsolete. Imagine that. A bunch of guys on YouTube and Instagram render the entire archive or the entire Rothschild's education academic construct null and void. Where is the power now? It's definitely with truth again, right? How can you teach history if you're not going to talk about Tartaria? I wouldn't even look at a map if it didn't have Tartaria on, because I know there's something missing from that map. That's power right there. That's power without even, nobody was trying to do that. That's just something that happens. It just happens when we evolve. And you've been pretty much the spearhead of that for half a decade. So I think that that's an incredible privilege. But yeah, I'm so grateful for having found you on YouTube, for sure. Yeah.
Appreciate that, Charles. And that's the whole thing. When you realize everything we've ever been taught is a lie, and then you have people that they have their whole academic careers based on this
Mm.
paradigm that isn't even true, but they don't know that.
Yeah.
They don't know that. Who,
No, no.
you
They
know,
don't.
and I didn't certainly plan on doing this. I mean, it wasn't on my bingo card, but life brought me in this direction. And I managed to unplug from the matrix a long time ago. So I didn't have a
Oh.
set belief system that I needed to hold on to. So when I started getting this information
Mm.
in, it was fairly easy for me to understand what I was receiving, and I had the skill sets to be able to get it back out. But I think it goes back to a lot of the spiritual things that we've been talking about here. Who are we really? What are we doing here? What is the purpose of our
Mm.
existence? How can we become better people? How can we make better choices? And I think with the growth, instead of being stagnant like you're talking about and the atrophy that comes along with that, we're face to face with so much evil. So how are we going to grow spiritually into a
Yeah.
place of love for all life? Doesn't mean we have to accept the bad. We don't have to
Mm.
like it for sure, but not invest our emotional energy into anger and hatred. That's not the right path.
Yeah.
Anger and hatred is not the right direction. Love and forgiveness is. And spiritual evolution and development is
Yeah.
what we're
100%.
doing
Yeah.
here. But our heads have been filled with all of this other stuff. It's not our true nature, not the real world, not the real
Mm.
history. And it's definitely challenging, but without the fire of that process, we wouldn't form into something new. We wouldn't become something new. And I kind
Mm.
of think that's where things are going. Will Tartaria be restored? Will this beautiful civilization come back? I've certainly heard people talk about that. That would be wonderful. Or are we going to create
Well,
something brand new?
there's a tipping point. I think there's a tipping point. I think if we get to a certain number of people who want to rebuild this one world Tartaria, everyone's in one empire, which doesn't always seem to have a clear monarchy. Sometimes people say Solomon, sometimes people say like Gog of Magog, Genghis Khan, Jesus maybe was the first king. But I think that there is a tipping point because this is all about acquiring enough people to manifest things, right? So I think that if we get enough people to want this, to return to whatever it was while we're discovering what it actually was at the same time, right? Because both things are happening simultaneously. I think then if we find out what it was and everybody wants to go back to that, then it is definitely where we have to be. If in fact history is repeating itself and if our history is just prophecy, then we will get back there. And it's not that those cities were destroyed, it's that this trick that God plays on people quite often that actually we have manifested some kind of history of the future that is now present in our current timeline. And all you really need is, people able to time travel. But maybe time travel isn't actually traveling through time. It's just ascending to a higher frequency and then coming back to this lower frequency. And the timeline doesn't really work the way we think it does. It's not like ABC 1, 2, 3. It's more like it's already existing on a different frequency. Because I do believe that like some of these like tribes, these hunter-gatherer tribes, couldn't see things that they had never imagined before. So a lot of these large ships, these large sail ships, like the Chinese treasure ships, just weren't seen by anyone because we had nothing to relate it to. In fact, I believe that we are all magicians, and if we cannot imagine something, then it didn't exist. So imagining Tartaria means that it either will exist in the future or it did exist and was removed and is going to return. Because I believe everything's a circle. I don't believe there's a beginning and an end. Even in the Bible, it says there is no end and beginning to God. And if God is the highest frequency, or if we are made in the image of God, then we can't look at time in the same way anymore. Because I think Tartaria teaches us not to look at time in the same way. We are not meant to die at 80 years old. We are not meant to die at 90 years old. We are supposed to be infinite. That's the image of God. That's one of the first scriptures in the Bible. It's like there is no end and there is no beginning. So it's a Luciferian belief. Janus is Lucifer. The god of doors, the god of time, that is Lucifer. Apollo was also Lucifer. All of our historical figures are not real people. I don't believe any of these were real people. Stop believing yesterday that the Colosseums were built for gladiators to kill each other or for Christians to be fed to lions. I don't believe any of that happened
I,
either.
I don't believe
I
it
think
either.
those were also esoteric structures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something to do with frequency,
Right. I
sound
think it's all about
frequency.
ascension. It's the only thing that seems to matter. Like you wouldn't build these buildings and you couldn't build these buildings if you didn't have some higher knowledge. I hope we get there. It'd be nice to see that. It'd be nice to see that happening and then to look back and to realize space, time, none of these things matter. Because Einstein didn't get any Nobel Prize in science for EMC squared. He got his Nobel Prize for realizing that sunlight was electricity. When I found that out, I was like, oh my God. They've been pushing all of his other experiments and not the real one that he won his prize for chemistry, I think, for.
Well, the other thing
So,
is that he worked as a clerk in a patent office. That's another one.
stealing from the Blackmores or something. Could all
It's
be just Blackmore knowledge taken, by the Dominican. The Dominican church didn't burn the books. They had a guy who memorized everything and just said, I've got that one, I haven't got that one, and they pretended to burn everything. So there are people who save everything. There are people here I think throughout all of history, there was always a group of people like you and me who kept everything safe or tried to keep everything alive by talking about it, or and maybe they had to stand in the corner of the street and shout things.
that could be what all the secret libraries are for, the Vatican Library
Yeah.
and others like
Mm,
that. I think we are living in interesting times. I do believe
yeah.
we're going to see some big changes in our lifetime. And we'll see. It's either everything's going to get better or
Mm,
we're toast. And not falling on the side of
yeah.
we're toast. I think things are going to get better. But I think whatever's been going on here on Earth has been going on for quite some time, and the ones behind it are not going to give up easily. And I think we're seeing that now. But we're
Mm,
waking up in spite of everything, and we're not what we've been told. We're
yeah.
much more powerful. And, talked about the tipping point. You get enough people in consciousness that start to
It changes
realize
everything.
that,
Yeah.
and there's an immediate effect in consciousness. And I think that's happening too. That tipping point
Mm,
is reached, and all of a sudden, more people know the kinds of things we're talking about.
yeah.
Not,
Everything
yeah,
changes. Yeah.
not
Yeah.
because they've necessarily experienced it, but that's the whole idea of the hundredth monkey effect. And we have a
Mm.
shared consciousness, and it doesn't take everybody waking up, it takes enough to wake up for these changes to happen. And
Yeah,
so
it just takes that. Yeah, it takes that, and I think that's when God maybe takes that as a hint. Oh, now it's time to save my people and start again. Yeah. Make no
something along
mistake,
those
we're
lines.
talking about Armageddon. We're talking about the end of the world. We're talking about Jericho, all of that. We're talking about Sodom and Gomorrah. We're talking about seven plagues. Yeah, we're talking about God taking his people away and flattening everything. That's what it's always about. It's happened before. We can't explain how it happened. We can't explain the power of it. But this is a very real thing. Like it's a very real get on the right side before it's too late. It's always been that, by the way. It's always been that. Leave the city. Don't turn back. Every story is about that. Lot's wife, don't turn around. Leave. Leave your stuff. None of this stuff matters. None of the physical stuff. If God can turn me into a genius or talking with confidence, even, then what happens then if you get to a higher frequency suddenly? Is it hard to find a job? No. Is it hard to provide for yourself? No. Do you need to worry about that? No. We're told in every religion that we don't have to worry, that there's like chosen people because it rings true. It resonates with a person. When it's the same frequency as you, like you can't ignore that. It's just, do these people know, like the people that are trying to fool you and stumble everyone? Like maybe they get great blessings like that, maybe they get those big palaces and yachts and everything. But would anyone say like you can be a billionaire for 1 year, but then you have to die? Would anyone accept that? Or even just like, okay, you have 10 years of life left, but you can be a multimillionaire. It's not money, it's time or it's life energy. That's the most valuable thing. Nobody in their right mind would say, "Oh, I'll rather just be a billionaire for 1 year than live through my entire natural life." It's insane. Nobody would. That's the answer. If God is watching everything we do and every part of our education, every little insignificant little piece of information that we've ever received before we woke up was just to stop us getting to that point. It makes it so simple because you suddenly realize why you're being told these things. And then you stop fearing. You stop fearing talking about the moon landings as being fake in 1969, live feed from the moon. Like you suddenly realize that you were a child. You were literally a child and you trusted the people that you thought were in charge. And now you have earned the right to see the devil's machinations, right? To see why evil exists. Like it exists so that you have to grow. You have to grow. Obviously, all of the things that have been happening in the world recently show you that without truth, there is no happiness. There is nothing. You can lose everything tomorrow, right? That's what they want you to think every day. You could all be gone tomorrow. Even if you're the president of Venezuela with your own personal army, it doesn't matter. It's like you have to learn that. You have to learn that there's nothing that you can't take any of this stuff with you. It's part of the illusion.
Well, we're blessed to be living in interesting times. I think that's
Yes,
a decent
definitely.
way of looking at it. We're definitely here for the shift, whatever that ends up being and how that ends up happening. And really applaud the work you're doing. I do think it's really important for anybody that has the inclination to start researching, go for it. It takes all of us.
Yeah, there's a lot of beautiful rewards, like understanding symbolism, which is, I think, the original language. Actually, every language boils down to symbolism, but understanding the origin of these things and trying to find what the positive words are. There's so much to learn, and none of this truth is going to be given to you. You do have to spend time.
And
Yeah.
people do have to be discerning.
But I think
This
great things happen the more time you spend looking at these old documents, parchment, symbols, buildings. Yeah, great things happen to you. Like,
There's a saying that goes something along the lines of, in a world of lies, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. And it
powerful
definitely
thing. Yeah.
feels that way. Or even seeking the truth is a revolutionary act.
And if people react in a negative way, that doesn't mean they didn't remember and listen. They're just dealing with their own trauma. It's
Hmm.
not directed at you if someone gets angry or was annoyed by you or something. They're just dealing with trauma, the trauma of waking up. Because we all went through it. I definitely did. And allow them to have that time because it's not easy to realize that the things that you've identified yourself with are actually the things that were just holding you back. Waking up is not easy. It's going to inspire a lot of hate sometimes. Some people really can't deal with it, but it's a seed. It's planting a seed. Like in the Bible, it's like the seed of God, the seed of doubt. And I think that in the end, what that person could do could be great things. They could be the one person that you need in the end to help you ascend further. And it's sad when I do come across people who it might be too late for. I mean, I'm not judging them, but I'm thinking, I don't think I can help this person. I'll just
Yeah.
say hi, good morning, but we can never really be friends. I mean, we can never really see eye to eye. Even though I'm tempted always to never give up, some people, I know it's not. I don't know what happened to them or if it's the right time for them or if the right time will come. And that is hard. I think that's also part of it.
It seems like people have to be ready for it. They just have to be
Mm.
at a place in their lives when they're open to new information. And before
Yeah.
then, it's just not something you can force.
It doesn't mean you can't actually be friends with them or even love them. It's just maybe we are also supposed to accept that it is not going to be like everyone. And maybe there's some reason why it shouldn't be everyone. I don't know. Yeah. It is hard to conceive of hearing this or learning about this or finding this and then just carrying on in like a normal everyday routine, right? Because
Right.
you don't want to go to work. You don't even want to sleep. You know, sometimes I just don't want to sleep. I got to finish this. But yeah, there's a lot of inspirational people out there, definitely more than there were a few years ago.
It's
Yeah.
definitely challenging to be in between two worlds, and you still have to go out in the marketplace and be around people and
Yeah, pretend to be, yeah, normal person.
pretend to be
Yeah.
a normal person. And, it's
Mm.
just make it work the best we can. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's been a pleasure talking with you, Charles. Thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. I know it's never
Thank
ending.
you. Thank you very much. I'm glad we've had this conversation. Kind of already helping me think about new ideas. Thank you very
And
much for having me.
you're very welcome, Charles, and thank you. Like we were talking about, it can change from one day to the next. The deeper you
Yeah,
go, the more information you get
right.
back, information that you wouldn't receive if you weren't looking.
Yeah.
And sometimes processing all of it can be quite overwhelming and knowing where to
Mm.
put it, how it all plays out.
Like a few days ago, I had a completely different plan. I was gonna go through ley lines. I have so many ley line maps I was collecting. It's organic. Maybe next time.
Yep, yep, that sounds great. And
Yeah.
I would love to hear more about your exploration of Taiwan and what you found there.
Yes, next time I will
That
show you some interesting things.
that would be
Okay.
great. I'm fascinated. Even though I need to slow down and maybe even take a break, I just don't
Yeah.
think I'm going to do that. There's just too much to
No,
bring forward.
you are the most important person in this movement for me, without a shadow of a doubt. And I think it is your academic approach because it's the ultimate pedestal or a foundation. If you have that, you can prove the history is wrong. We can start again now, and we can find out why there's Moorish buildings in Nevada or
Mhm.
Wisconsin. And then we find the original names, and then the other people find this piece of information, and now the whole world knows that the Native American is the one that was categorized as Negro and then African. And that is down to you. Make no mistake, that is down to you. That's down to you, and then people taking it further, like me and a few other people. And then I made connections between the hidden symbolism within the American currency, where they have the Moor heads decapitated and hidden behind windows. And yeah, I mean, this is going to carry on. This is going to be a big thing. I think we're in 7 AD. Yeah, I think this is a prophecy. And they know what's happening. Yeah. I'm sure there are obviously, demonic entities here in this realm that we have to prepare ourselves for, defend ourselves against. Yeah. But we
I,
can't lose because it's prophecy.
I just have this unshakable belief that they're not going to get away with what they've done. I just don't
I
believe that.
don't
However it
know. They
happens,
can't. They can't. Otherwise, why are there any human beings here? If the devil could kill
there's,
anyone, there wouldn't be anyone here. I mean, that's just my reasoning, but I think that's pretty logical. If
I,
the devil could kill one human being, he could kill anyone, right? So why are we here? Why is he going through all of this nightmare of seeing everyone wake up? That's not nice for him. He's not going to be happy about that. He was wrong in the Garden of Eden with his snake venom. He was wrong because the Lamb of God is where snake venom is derived, even in the scientific world. So,
it's going to be sit back and watch things unfold. But once you start on the path that we're on, there's really no stopping point.
hmm,
There really isn't, because there's so
no.
much that's been kept hidden from us. And it really does take all of us doing our own research to pull these threads out, because they were meant never to be found again. And, even a lot of the
Yes, that's the
architect,
beauty of it, right? That's the beauty of it. That's almost like a proof of a God consciousness potentially within humans. There was no starting point. There was just something, some rule was broken. Some kind of freedom was taken away because the devil's all about freedom. That's the argument. That's the only reason why he's been given time.
and we just had to figure it out on our own. Thank you, Charles. Enjoy
Cool.
your day.
Thank you very much. I will have a spring in my step.
I'd love
Okay.
to hear more about your story and how you got to Taiwan and all that stuff, but we'll save that for
Yes,
another
yes,
time.
we should do that. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day, Michelle.
Thank
Goodbye.
you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.